This is Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, broadcasting live from the Fixing America Command Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, here is your host, Steve Laffey.
Hey, good afternoon. It's Steve Laffey. Friday afternoon, November 22nd, 2013, and it's 50 years ago today that one of the great tragedies in our political history happened, where John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, around 12:30 p.m. And although I was 1 year old at the time, and did not, not one of those people who can remember where I was, it was a deep, deep impact on our country. We just thought today, just thinking about the show today, that we would just do a tribute or a remembrance of John F. Kennedy 50 years later. And by the way, in getting ready for this show, it's been, unlike other shows where I get ready to talk to you about specific facts about the budget or specific facts about foreign policy. And this one just taking a whole look back at our country. And the last 24 hours, in some ways, you get overcome with, quite frankly, with sadness. I mean, are we a country that, and you'll hear this later on, is that Kennedy talks about courage and judgment and integrity and dedication in his City on a Hill speech just before he becomes president of the United States, as he's leaving Massachusetts but not really leaving his home. But, it's 50 years later, and our country seems to be the kind of clips we're going to play today, and we're going to play a lot of them, seem to have nothing in common with what's going on in America today. Doesn't seem like anybody talks about courage, judgment, integrity, dedication. We played the president talking about taking a nap on Thanksgiving a couple days ago. I mean, it's really just incredible what goes on in the country. But listen, in my lifetime, I grew up a Roman Catholic, so to talk about what it's like to be a Roman Catholic in Rhode Island as a young kid, you knew all about John F. Kennedy. Didn't matter whether your family was Democrat or some Republican, you were all for John F. Kennedy. In fact, it went right up until I got older. I went to Harvard Business School, and my second year Harvard Business School effectively rented a place with three other guys. Two guys who were supposed to rent with, they kind of skipped out on us. Good guys, they just had another place to live. Went and got a couple other guys, one of my buddy Jim's brothers, another guy named Terry. Had a great time, but we had no money, no plates, no furniture, no spoons. I'll never forget this. Literally, a lady who lived around the corner, and I was living, about 50 yards, 100 yards from John F. Kennedy Elementary School in Somerville, Massachusetts, in the district that John F. Kennedy had been the congressman in from 46 to 52. And, of course, then other Kennedys held that seat and so forth, including Joe Kennedy and so forth. But a lady we had nothing. A lady around the corner died. There was going to be an estate sale. We went over there the day before and met with the daughter. A very old lady had died. And they just gave us the furniture. It was, this day and age, terrible furniture. The TV set must have weighed 300 pounds, one of these big bulk TV sets. And I'll never forget it. We get up and they gave us the plates. And all the plates were John F. Kennedy and his wife on the plate. So every meal for a year, well, I'm eating nothing but spaghetti. Different numbers of print spaghetti. If you ever checked the numbers, we tried to stop the boredom. We just kept getting different numbers, piling up but there's John F. Every day there's John F. Kennedy. When I was a kid, my parents used to have an album. You go on eBay right now. You can find these albums for sale. They're not must have been millions of them made, I suppose. But we would play the album. You put the album in. This is a long time ago. 7 years old, and I just play Kennedy speeches. And so this just, this huge impact where I'm from in the New England area, especially coming from such a Roman Catholic, Irish Catholic background, St. Paul's Church. I mean, my house had a picture of Kennedy in it in the 60s. And it must have been late 60s when I remember seeing this. Heck, even me, even as an adult, 10, 12 years ago, I'm in a Northern Vermont bookstore and I see a coloring book, totally perfect condition, coloring book by done by Mrs. Kennedy, and it's pictures no one's done anything to it. It's perfectly. It's a coloring book that I bought it and I got it in a safe deposit box. I don't know if it's worth anything. I must have paid $50 for it. So, but it throws us back to a different time in the tragedy of '63. But it's not here to remember that. We're not here to do the show and the tragedy and so much of what happened today. We're here to talk about why we think Kennedy was popular, what were his beliefs, and how different that is from America today, how different it is from the Democratic Party he was part of today. You can see a clip I was watching last night of Nancy Pelosi talking about John F. Kennedy as if he was part of their belief system. John F. Kennedy was pro-life. There's a clip you can play of him talking about population explosion. He has this great comment where it's, population explosion. It's not when you're talking about you, it's about your kids. It's always about somebody else. And, totally pro-life guy. He cut taxes. He wanted them, we'll talk about that. But he has nothing in common with the Democratic Party today, yet they cling to him. Probably because what happened afterwards, they got Carter. They're not literally clinging to Carter. Got Clinton, which they still around and so forth. But no one really clings to Clinton. He wasn't a terrible president in some respects, not like we have today. But certainly no one's going to put him down in history as one of these great icons. So you really have to go back to, and no one's going to talk about Barack Obama this way when he gets through. So you go back all the way to Kennedy, 50 years ago. Anyway, what we're going to do here today is we're just going to remember John F. Kennedy. We're going to play some clips. Why don't we start? We can start with a number of clips, but civil rights for Kennedy was this was the think of all these things that were happening, and from the court rulings in the 50s, but things weren't desegregated. Kennedy is getting to be president. By the way, this is a story about a week before he gets to be president. They've locked up Martin Luther King, and none of the people around Kennedy want him to comment on it at all. And someone suggested, why don't you call Mrs. King on the phone and just at least express your personal sympathy? So maybe it's 3 weeks before the election. Well, he does. And I guess Bobby Kennedy, the brother, wouldn't it be great to have a brother like Bobby Kennedy, by the way, always at your back, always taking on, always with you. Bobby Kennedy's an amazing guy in himself. And so Bobby Kennedy's like, see thing, like, what'd you do that for? We can't have this get out. They don't want to lose the southern states. Anyway, it looks as though Mrs. King, she makes a speech about it somewhere, and people go crazy. So they send these postcards. They put them on buses. Now, we wouldn't do that today. They printed them up, I guess, up in the north. They shipped them down to all the black churches and passed them out that Nixon remained silent while Kennedy, issued a sympathy to Mrs. King and helped him win the election. All these black churches, imagine just you're going to church on a Sunday and people pull in with just thousands of these things to pass out to all the black people in the South that you can get to. And the churches, of course, are full. They're still full down in the South in the black churches. Not so much in New England. But just amazing stuff that you just can't imagine happening today. So here's Kennedy. Just out playing some clips. I don't want to go too far. Let's play Kennedy on civil rights.
We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the scriptures and is as clear as the American Constitution. The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities, whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot eat lunch in a restaurant open to the public, if he cannot send his children to the best public school available, if he cannot vote for the public officials who represent him, if, in short, he cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? Who among us would then be content with the counsels of patience and delay? 100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. They are not yet freed from the bonds of injustice. They are not yet freed from social and economic oppression. And this nation, for all its hopes and all its boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
Will not be fully free until all its citizens are free. That's 1963 civil rights speech. I think it's June 1963. So we passed from 1960 to 1963, and we have the situations down the South and University of Alabama and University of Mississippi, George Wallace, all these things that are going on. The Kennedy brothers are trying to figure out their way, how to solve this problem without going too far at the time, even though there's sympathies with them. It's really an amazing story about the Kennedys' involvement in civil rights, and get blamed, because it shows you about politics, get blamed for not doing enough, get lionized for doing so much, just all in the eye of the beholder as the country moved into the sort of the modern era, and the first president born in the 1900s was elected. Of course, you go back, and we can't play every clip of every great speech, but you think about Kennedy growing up, and his father's not exactly, I wouldn't call it a pacifist, but his father gets kicked out of being, his father's a very wealthy guy. He's a shrewd businessman. Some people would say involved in some things that were beyond shrewd. But he's worth, like, in today's dollars, back then about $400 million. And wants his kids to be president. And, of course, gets himself kicked out of being ambassador to England. And, of course, his two oldest sons, Joe and John, enter into the military. And one is in the flying, and he gets killed. The other one, John F. Kennedy, we all know about the PT-109, which I turned to the greatest political thing of all time, wearing little buttons around PT-109. And, he had such a privileged life, but in command of this boat. I mean, look, that's what people used to do. They weren't avoiding the draft in Vietnam. It was a war, and they went. Son of very privileged people, probably a way to get him out of it. And he's got to swim miles, surrounded by sharks, in water to get to an island. And people don't even know the full story. They get to this island. He's got this guy on his back, facing the other way. He's got the part of his cloth or whatever in his mouth to carry this guy. He's a very strong swimmer with a very bad back. And he gets him all the way through. And they keep going from island to island. And finally have this coconut where they give it to some Indian type person in that area, and native, and they finally get someone to come get him. But I mean, think about how could he even survive that? So those things toughen you up, I would imagine. And so those are the things that we really take a look at. We look at as we look at the present. We've got so many more clips to play. It looks like we should take a little break right here. Anyway, it's Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back with a lot of clips about John F. Kennedy. Today is the 50th anniversary of his assassination. It was a tragic day in America. It affected many, many millions of people for a generation. Steve Laffey at LaffeyRadio.com, and you can follow us on Facebook at Laffey Radio, and like us on Twitter at Laffey Radio. Just remember Laffey Radio. We put these shows up in the air as soon as we're done, and you can watch them forever. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
The call to serve. It has no sound, yet I have heard it in the whispered retelling of honorable sacrifices made by those who have served before me. The call to serve has no form, yet I have clearly seen it in the eyes of men and women infinitely more courageous and more driven than most. The call to serve has no weight, yet I have held it in my hands. I will commit to carry it close to my heart until my country is safe and the anguish of those less fortunate has been soothed. The call to serve is at once invisible and always present. And for those who choose to answer the call, for their country, for their fellow man, for themselves, it is the most powerful force on earth. America's Navy, a global force for good.
Students, when I call the reason for your absences throughout the years, please exit the auditorium without your high school diploma. Too tired, family trip, sick day, starting the holidays early.
Starting in the 6th grade, students who miss 18 days or more of school in a year for any reason will fall behind and risk not graduating high school. How many days of school has your child missed this year? Absences add up. Keep track at boostattendance.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
in almost every school bus and classroom. I go to school with your children. We say the Pledge of Allegiance together. You see me around the neighborhood and you tell me that I'm a pretty good kid. Well, I'm one out of every 5 children in America, and I'm struggling with hunger. This problem is closer than you think. My teacher tells me we can grow up to be whatever we want. I want to grow up to be someone who doesn't go to bed hungry. There's enough food in this country to feed everybody. Please visit feedingamerica.org today and find your local food bank for ways to help. Every dollar you donate helps provide 8 meals for kids like me, quietly struggling with hunger. Together, we are Feeding America, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
I am today announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. The presidency is the most powerful office in the free world. Through its leadership can come a more vital life for all of our people. In it are centered the hopes of the globe around us for freedom and a more secure life.
Senator Kennedy, if you don't win the presidential nomination, will you accept the vice presidency?
I shall not on any condition be a candidate for vice president. If I fail in this endeavor, I shall return and serve in the United States Senate.
Steve Laffey here. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. I love the end of that, where you finally get a direct answer from, have to go back to 1960 to get a direct answer from for a presidential candidate. Senator Kennedy, if you are not successful being president, would you serve as the vice president? No. I won't. I'll go back to the U.S. Senate. I'd rather do that than be the vice president. Don't ask me anymore. I'm not sure anybody asked him again. It was such a decisive answer. But that's his part of his announcement speech. We're Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're doing a quick 1 hour, and we're going to run out of time. I'm going to play a lot of clips. That's a great clip. President Kennedy. We're doing a little tribute to President Kennedy, who I think is a pretty conservative guy. Today's world, he could not be a Democrat. It's not why he's popular. I mean, the Democrats, I liked them a lot. Everyone found out more about him. In fact, when I was running for mayor, people would say, who people inspired you? I'd say Reagan, Kennedy, and Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt. Because I was in Rhode Island, everybody thought I would have mean FDR. But it's not just the inspirational speeches. He basically agreed with the American people that we're larger than just the individual units, but it goes back to the individual. And how many times, if you listen to these speeches like I have, just throughout the years, how many times does he actually specifically talk about God? All the time. People don't do that today. Talk about their faith. They don't talk about God, and let alone ever bringing up Jesus. Oh my gosh, that can't happen today. But he did, and his speech about, to explain to people why it was a big deal that he was a Catholic. It's hard to imagine this stuff now. Back in the night when he was running in 1960, big speech he gave in West Virginia. But here's the man. Let's go back to and here's a guy who, listen to closely this clip about putting a man on the moon. We'll talk about it. It's a long clip, but I want you to hear about. There's a lot of things in his Man on the Moon speech. This is down in Houston in '62.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too. We shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this decade is out, then we must be bold.
Take a look at that. I mean, not because it's easy, because it's hard. And of course, the man in the moon speech, and he gave really two big ones on that. One was a little bit earlier to Congress. The one, we're not going to play the clip, the one he gave to Congress, but here's a man who specifically asks for a specific amount of money for this goal, and at one point tells the Congress, tells America, hey, if we're just going to go halfway, it's better not to go at all. Either we've got to do this, and it's going to be very hard, or let's not fool around about it. And he asked for a specific amount of money for Congress. So he's thought it through about a goal that needs to be accomplished. Compare that to today. I mean, they whipped around the TARP money at $700 billion, and didn't even know what they were spending it on. Just taking your money and just whipping it into the wind. First, it was going to be for construction projects. Then it went to the banks. Republicans agree with because they're all scared because I guess no one understands the financial situation. They don't understand. They didn't know that the people who run the country don't understand finances. Kennedy did. Heck, I'll talk about in a little bit. We'll talk about one of the speeches he gave to the Economic Club of New York, where he actually understands finance and debt. It's amazing. And here he is talking about they're going with alloys that they don't even haven't invented yet, right? They're going to take this stuff to the moon. They don't even know how to do it. The thing's going to be a football field long. Heat is going to be, but we're going to go do it. And guess what? We did. You look at future presidents like Nixon, who hated Kennedy. Nixon, this is one of the shortfalls of Nixon, of course. Not only did he lose to Kennedy, but when this whole thing went to the moon, they didn't even put a Kennedy emblem on it. Nixon didn't. Gave almost no credit, no speaking about it. And that's how Kennedy's effect went on for years and years. It still goes on today. We're doing a show about it. It goes, there have been other presidents who've been shot young. That's how Roosevelt became president. And McKinley just faded off into the future, into the past. But not Kennedy, because he thought like we do. He thought like middle America. He had common sense and a way to explain it in a positive outlook for America that he saw clearly, but he talked, there's a lot, we got to keep playing some clips here because it's not, we just got to keep playing. Here's one from June 10th, 1963 about negotiating with enemies. Here's just, take a listen to this one.
So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures. And we are all mortal.
He understood that we had our enemies. Hey, look at it. Listen, talking 61 about China. You've heard me talk about China forever. He knew. Here's a quote from China. And he said this in 61. And I would say that my view today is more in accordance with the facts than my view was in 49. He gave a big speech in 49 about this. But I've always felt, and I think history will record, that the change of China from being a country friendly to us to a country which is unremittingly hostile affected very strongly the balance of power in the world. I could go on. He knew. Chiang Kai-shek, the way Truman, Eisenhower, these guys didn't quite understand. He knew. He's a virulent anti-communist. He and Reagan shared that. And he talked about it all. By the way, even people in his party didn't want to talk about the way he talked about it then. Forget about now. But wouldn't you rather have a guy with that kind of view, that we have enemies, we'll find a point, but we'll recognize that they're enemies, if we had someone like that dealing with Iran today, rather than just giving away the store when we have them on the knees? Here's another clip. Let's go. Let's keep going here. This is a clip about nuclear weapons. I'll play 2 in a row here.
Today, every inhabitant of this planet must contemplate the day when this planet may no longer be habitable. Every man, woman, and child lives under a nuclear sword of Damocles, hanging by the slenderest of threads, capable of being cut at any moment by accident or miscalculation or by madness. The weapons of war must be abolished before they abolish us.
He understood. Think of the time they lived in. We still live in there's still a lot of nuclear weapons pointed at our country. We don't live in the same kind of situation. But Kennedy understood the enemies he was up against. Now, did he make mistakes? Yeah, and we'll talk about some of that. Let's take another quick break. Come back with a longer clip from one of his speeches after the second break here. It's Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America, talking about one of our great presidents, John F. Kennedy, today. He was assassinated 50 years ago today at about 12:30 in Dallas. It's a terrible situation for the country. It still lingers today, 50 years later, not just because of his charisma, because of his policies. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Well, I finally did it. I opened a 401k.
What? Why? Just wait for the inheritance. We've definitely got a rich uncle somewhere. We're one call away from the winner's circle at the Derby, dinners with multiple forks, a vacation home in the country, using summer as a verb.
You don't actually think that, do you?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs, the Rhode Island Society of CPAs, and the Ad Council.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. It's like tiny nails in the air poke my lungs. I start to cough. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital.
Today, 1 out of 13 children suffer from some form of asthma, accounting for nearly 1/3 of all emergency room visits.
I feel like I'm choking. It's kind of like an elephant is on my chest. A little whistle sound comes out when I breathe.
But while your child may suffer from asthma doesn't have to make your child suffer. There are simple ways you can prevent your child's next attack. To learn more, log on to www.noattacks.org or call your doctor, because even one attack is one too many.
I feel like a fish with no water.
Brought to you by the EPA, the Ad Council, and this station.
I am an American soldier.
I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place this first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I always maintain my arms, my equipment, and myself.
I am an expert and I am a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
There's strong, and there's Army Strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
record number of Americans, upwards of 67 million, go to the polls to elect the 35th President of the United States. Citizens from Maine to Hawaii record their choices as the attention of the entire globe focuses on the contest for the leadership of the most powerful nation of the free world. The Democratic nominee is an early favorite, and first returns bear out predictions in Mr. Kennedy's favor. But GOP standard-bearer Richard Nixon is staunchly supported, not least by President Eisenhower, who is up early, arriving at 6:18 a.m. at Cumberland Township, Pennsylvania, near his Gettysburg farm, to cast his ballot.
Steve Laffey here. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. You can reach us at LaffeyRadio.com. We've got all the clips up there. We do this Laffey Minute that goes up every day. We got the Fixing America Presents, a longer series, just 2 or 3 minutes. Pass them around to people. Today, that was election day for President Kennedy, 1960. He wins the race, close race, takes Cook County, Illinois, where the votes are coming in all scrambled. Someone thinks his father has a big hand in it. But Kennedy, of course, falls asleep at 4:30 in the morning up at Hyannisport. They take over his brother Bobby's house as the campaign headquarters. They take over the rooms. I guess they kick the kids out, or most of the kids seem to be just running around. He wakes up and comes out at 9:30 in the morning. He's the president. And that was a tough race. I mean, Adlai Stevenson had run in 52 and 56. He was supposed to be the easy nominee. FDR's widow, I guess, had endorsed Stevenson. Kennedy was the conservative in the race. No doubt about it. The conservative Democrat in the race. Today he would be a Republican. And it just an amazing, that was an amazing race. And how close it was. And, of course, Nixon, who lost, became president in 68. And it kept, the presidents later on always had to refer or not make a decision about, because Kennedy had brothers, of course. And, of course, Robert was tragically shot in 68. But Ted was around. And it was Carter who made the tragic mistake of doing nothing with the Kennedys and having nothing to do with the Kennedys. And Ted ran against him, really causing Carter, in one respect, to lose because they had a very divided primary. And when Carter even accepts the nomination, it's Kennedy up there with him who refuses, make sure he walks farther away at the convention, Democratic Convention 1980, because of what has happened to the situation with Carter and Kennedy's. And he never helps him out and actually secretly hopes that Reagan wins. Now, along the way, Reagan is a Kennedy lover, even though they opposed each other back in the day because Reagan was a Republican, became one in the 50s. But Reagan running for re-election is a smart guy. He invokes Kennedy 50, 60 times along the campaign trail to the point where people are screaming, you can't talk about Kennedy. But they actually agreed on a lot of issues: strong national defense, simplify the tax code, etc. So that's the election day. We're going to play a couple longer clips before we get off. I don't have much time. Let's play the part of the inaugural speech. It's a very famous speech. This is John Kennedy, January 1960.
Let both sides seek to invoke the wonders of science instead of its terrors. Together, let us explore the stars, conquer the deserts, eradicate disease, tap the ocean depth, and encourage the arts and commerce. Let both sides unite to heed in all corners of the earth the command of Isaiah to undo the heavy burdens and let the oppressed go free. And if a beachhead of cooperation may push back the jungle of suspicion, let both sides join in creating a new endeavor, not a new balance of power, but a new world of law, where the strong are just and the weak secure and the peace preserved. All this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us begin. In your hands, my fellow citizens, more than mine, will rest the final success or failure of our course. Since this country was founded, each generation of Americans has been summoned to give testimony to its national loyalty. The graves of young Americans who answered the call to service surround the globe. Now the trumpet summons us again, not as a call to bear arms, though arms we need, not as a call to battle, though in battle we are, but a call to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle, year in and year out, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, the common enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. Can we forge against these enemies a grand and global alliance, north and south, east and west, that can assure a more fruitful life for all mankind? Will you join in that historic effort? In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. Finally, whether you are citizens of America or citizens of the world, ask of us here the same high standards of strength and sacrifice which we ask of you. With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own.
John F. Kennedy inaugural speech. Here on earth, God's work must truly be our own. After citing Isaiah or the Old Testament and going through, ask not what the country can do for you, what you can do for the country, which goes back and forth from being a liberal to a conservative statement. But think of the times. Think of the people in the crowd. And think of someone who speaks of God so freely. In 1960, 1963, until his death. Someone who in these speeches is drawing the best out of people. And then compare it to what we hear today. Compared to what we call the nuclear option in the Senate yesterday. Really? We're not here to, listen, we could do a whole negative show on anybody. We're not here to talk about the theories of his death, the assassination. This is a tribute. Man was a great president. Gave us a lot. Think about when he went to Berlin. I think I have time I can play this one clip here. I got to play this one because we won't have time after the next session. Here he is in Berlin, one of the famous speeches.
There are many people in the world who really don't understand, or say they don't, what is the great issue between the free world and the communist world. Let them come to Berlin. Freedom has many difficulties, and democracy is not perfect. But we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in, to prevent them from leaving us. I know of no town, no city that has been besieged for 18 years that still lives with the vitality and the force and the hope and the determination of the city of West Berlin. Today, in the world of freedom, the proudest boast is, Ich bin ein Berliner.
You want to know freedom, he says? That's June 26th of 63. He's in Berlin. You want to know freedom? After they built this wall, after Berlin was separated inside the Eastern Bloc with the United States and Great Britain and France and Russia taking 4 quadrants of it, and then they have to build this wall because it's the only way to escape for humans to live free. You want to know freedom? You come to Berlin. Look at the fight that they airlifted food in for these people. Are we doing that for the Egyptian Christians today? Are we doing anything at all like that today? Are we waiting for the next natural disaster so we can send in some food and say what a great job we did? People's yearning to be free. Kennedy knew it. I know it. And you know it. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Picture this, your next trip, Utah, 5 national parks. First, Zion. You're walking, the ground rises, the ground drops, the ground becomes water. Next, Bryce. You're riding a mule. You're riding a mule under giant orange drip castles. You are not dreaming. You will not forget this. On to Capitol Reef. Take the scenic route, the really scenic route. Take a path you've never taken and see the stars for the first time. Now for Canyonlands. You're riding a bike. You're riding a bike on Mars. Now you're riding the rapids. Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, Classic. Arches, 5:32 a.m. Some things are worth racing the sunrise for. The horizon lightens. You round the corner. Whoa. This is Life Elevated. The Mighty 5. 5 iconic parks, 1 epic experience. Plan your trip at visitutah.com.
This is Nnamdi Asamoah. I play football for the Philadelphia Eagles, but what I do off the field with United Way might be more important. I'm a volunteer tutor and mentor. Why? Because over 1 million kids a year drop out of school, and that's not okay. It takes 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes about the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be me, or it could be you. Studies show that if we get to these kids earlier, their chances are better, and kids who read well by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate. So join me in United Way. Suit up and take the pledge. Become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor, because when a child succeeds, we all succeed. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way, the Ad Council, and the National Football League.
I'm always up for a challenge. It's the feeling of accomplishment that drives me. And there's no better challenge than serving part-time in the Coast Guard Reserve. I protect my country, work with the best and brightest. I get great pay and benefits in return. The Coast Guard Reserve is important work. I get to serve my community, and it's always rewarding.
If you were born ready, there's a new challenge waiting for you. Learn about serving part-time at gocoastguard.com/reserve.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.
I was about to come back from the break. I was just listening so intently. You can picture, and I wasn't even alive at the time, I can picture Cronkite stopping, taking his glasses off. Haven't seen this in years, but it's bolted in my mind. Steve Laffey, Steve Laffey's Fixing America at LaffeyRadio.com. We're doing a special tribute to the slain president 50 years ago today, this afternoon, John F. Kennedy, and what he meant to people and why his ideas connected with people. And we've been playing a lot of his clips, and I've been talking as little as possible. In fact, I'm going to better start another clip right now. We're not going to get through. We're going to play a long clip and we'll close. This is the City on a Hill speech. You have to hear this one and pay attention to the end.
Speaker Thompson, President Powers, Lieutenant Governor McLaughlin, members of the General Court, constitutional officers, Reverend clergy, ladies and gentlemen. I have welcomed this opportunity to address this historic body, and through you, the people of Massachusetts, to whom I am so deeply indebted for a lifetime of friendship and trust. For 14 years, I have placed my confidence in the citizens of Massachusetts, and they have generously responded by placing their confidence in me. Now, on the Friday after next, I am to assume new and broader responsibilities. But I am not here to bid farewell to Massachusetts. For 43 years, whether I was in London or in Washington or in the South Pacific or elsewhere, this has been my home. And God willing, wherever I serve, this shall remain my home. It was here that my grandparents were born. It is here, I hope, that my grandchildren will be born. I speak neither from false provincial pride nor artful political flattery. For no man about to enter high office in this country can ever be unmindful of the contributions which this state has made to our national greatness. Its leaders have shaped our destiny long before the great republic was born. Its principles have guided our footsteps in times of crisis as well as in times of calm. Its democratic institutions, including this historic body, have served as beacon lights for other nations as well as for our sister states. For what Pericles said of the Athenians has long been true of this Commonwealth: we do not imitate, for we are a model to others. And so it is that I carry with me from this state to that high and lonely office to which I now succeed more than fond memories or firm friendships. The enduring quality of Massachusetts, the common threads woven by the Pilgrim and the Puritan, the fisherman and the farmer, the Yankee and the immigrant, will not be and could not be forgotten in this nation's executive mansion. They are an indelible part of my life, my convictions, my view of the past, and my hopes for the future. Allow me to illustrate. During the last 60 days, I have been at the task of constructing an administration. It has been a long and deliberate process. Some have counseled greater speed. Others have counseled more expedient tests. But I have been guided by the standard John Winthrop set before his shipmates on the flagship Arabella 331 years ago, as they too faced the task of building a new government on a perilous frontier. We must always consider, he said, that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us. Today, the eyes of all people are truly upon us. And our governments, in every branch, at every level, national, state, and local, must be as a city upon a hill, constructed and inhabited by men aware of their great trusts and their grave responsibilities. For we are setting out upon a voyage in 1961, no less hazardous than that undertaken by the Arabella in 1630. We are committing ourselves to tasks of statecraft no less awesome than that of governing the Massachusetts Bay Colony, beset as it was by terror without and disorder within. History will not judge our endeavors, and a government cannot be selected merely on the basis of color or creed or party affiliation. Neither will competence and loyalty and stature, while essential to the utmost, suffice in times such as these. For of those to whom much is given, much is required. And when at some future date the high court of history sits in judgment on each one of us, recording whether in our brief span of service we fulfilled our responsibilities to the state, our success or failure in whatever office we may hold will be measured by the answers to 4 questions. First, were we truly men of courage, with the courage to stand up to one's enemies and the courage to stand up when necessary to one's own associates, the courage to resist public pressure as well as private greed? Secondly, were we truly men of judgment, with perceptive judgment of the future as well as of the past, of our own mistakes as well as the mistakes of others, with enough wisdom to know what we did not know and enough candor to admit it? Third, were we truly men of integrity, men who never ran out on either the principles in which they believed or the people who believed in them, men whom neither financial gain nor political ambition could ever divert from the fulfillment of our sacred trust? Finally, were we truly men of dedication, with an honor mortgaged to no single individual or group and compromised by no private obligation or aim, but devoted solely to serving the public good and the national interest? Courage, judgment, integrity, dedication, these are the historic qualities of the Bay Colony and of the Bay State, the qualities which this state have consistently sent to this chamber, here in Beacon Hill in Boston, and to Capitol Hill back in Washington. And these are the qualities which, with God's help, this son of Massachusetts hopes will characterize our government's conduct in the 4 stormy years that lie ahead. Humbly I ask his help in that undertaking, but aware that on earth his will is worked by men, I ask for your help and your prayers as I embark on this new and solemn journey. Thank you.
Wow. That's 1961. It's just before he's going to go take office. City on a Hill speech, of course, talking about Winthrop. Came over in 1630 with 11 ships. The colonies were moving forward. Winthrop ran the Bay Colony several times, I guess. But talking about courage, judgment, integrity, dedication, and defining it. And at the end, asking for God's help and knowing that his work will be done in his way. But he's going to stand before him. John F. Kennedy, 50 years ago today, tragically assassinated. We try to do some justice to his life. And I'll just repeat what I said at the beginning of the show. It was sort of sad to prepare for the show. Take about 12 hours of just listening, watching shows, and trying to get it down to an hour, and picking out clips with Boss. But it's kind of sad because think about it. Do we have people like this who have courage? Who when we talk about dedication, and we talks about judgment and dedication. He talks about not mortgaging it to any single group. All we talk about are lobbyists. All we talk about are elected officials have mortgaged it to every single group up there on K Street. Not to us. It's time, folks, for a great reawakening. It's time for a great reawakening of this country so we can move forward. And it's people like this and principles like this that have to come back. We got to sign off at LaffeyRadio.com. It's a hard break. We're very sorry. We're going all day. God bless everybody out there. I mean, if you get a chance, listen to Profiles in Courage like I do in the car. There's a lot to be gained from looking back on Kennedy's presidency. And we'll talk to you Monday. God bless you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Steve Laffey's Fixing America radio program on the Laffey Radio Network. Fixing America is broadcast Monday through Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. right here at www.laffeyradio.com. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this broadcast without the express written consent of Laffey Network, LLC is prohibited.